Good evening and welcome to an Inside the Rookery special outside broadcast from CYMERA 2023, Scotland's Festival of Science Fiction, Horror and Fantasy Writing. We liked it so much last year that we have come back. Well, Ab's invited us back. Yay!
They can see and hear us!
Yay! We're sorry we're a bit late. This is the first time we've actually done an outside broadcast with proper mics rather than last year just doing it from various laptops and random devices. So we had a few gremlins to get over. This year we've got our beautiful new banners behind us and we have two new authors to talk to, Greig Watson and Stark Holborn. Welcome to the stream.
Hello.
Hi. As always, we've got questions pre-submitted from our patrons and from our lovely friendly Discord community, but we also have a live audience, so we'll be taking questions from the audience as well. Before we start, however, with our pre-submitted questions, I will pass over to my fellow host Andy to introduce himself and then to our guests.
So hello, I'm Andy Leask. I'm also a part of Rookery. I'm a writer and I'm also a teacher, so I'm an educator. So to Greg.
Hello everyone, I'm Greig Watson, so I'm an independent RPG designer based here in Edinburgh under the name Gregorian Games, but I'm also a researcher and instructor of historical fencing as well.
I'm Stark Holborn, I'm a novelist and I'm a games writer. My most recent book is called Hell's 8, which is a follow-up to Tenlo, and they're both space westerns published by Titan. As a games writer, I am the lead writer on Shadows of Doubt, which is a procedurally generated detective game set in alternative 1980s. And then I'm also a writer on a game called Nivalis, which is a follow-up to Cloudpunk, which is a slice of life cyberpunk city sim. And they're both voxel-based, which is quite weird, but that seems to be the niche I've fallen into.
Well, thank you so much and welcome to the stream again. So let us jump straight into the questions. If you have a question in the audience, just feel free to fling up your hand and we will come to you. But I will go to, here Andy Leask was desperate to ask this. You can ask it.
Which one was it?
I read that Nunslinger is a true story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is one of Stark's novels, Nunslinger. And it says that it's a true story. Is it a true story? Is it a true story in the Coen Brothers sense of it being a true story?
It's absolutely not a true story.
Okay.
I wrote it. It was because it's kind of in the vein of those like original penny westerns and penny dreadfuls, and they always say they're a true story. So I said, the true tale of Sister Thomas Josephine, and that's got me into a bit of trouble since. And then at one point, I was tweeted by the Visitandine sisters, who are still in Missouri, and they actually tweeted me and said, "We're reading your book." Oh God. So, but no, unfortunately, not a true tale, but true.
There's maybe a truth within it, though, like with the Coen Brothers.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to see it here. Yeah. I haven't seen a copy for a while.
Okay, so Roderick has given us an easy opener. He says it's an easy opener. Who knows if it is or not? So Roderick has asked, here's an easy opener. What would each of the panel's dream project be to work on? And in case it's different, what project is your white whale?
I mean, I'm kind of working on two of my dream projects, which sounds like I'm totally trying to kiss ass, but they're both really nice games to work on. I think it makes a big difference that they're both indie games, and so Shadows of Doubt, we're a core team of 3, and then Nivalis again, it's a bigger game, but still quite a small team, and there's just a lot of creative freedom in it, and we get to do all sorts of fun stuff. So yeah, they're both great and real learning for us. But I think I would love to I'd love to write a sort of big sprawling narrative adventure, I think, at some point. I do experiment with interactive fiction, but it'd be fun to write a really kind of intricate, sprawling Gormenghast-esque narrative adventure. That would be fun.
For me, I'm not really sure what my dream project would be, to be honest. With regards to RPG stuff, it would be fun to get stuck into, as you say, something quite big and sprawling, epic. So within the RPG world, for those who are in the know, there was the Enemy Within adventures for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. There's some laughs going on because I know some people are quite close to that. But that was a very impressive thing to go through as a player. So maybe one day something along those lines would be cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool to go through as a player. We're going through that right now. And Gormenghast. Yeah, I almost did my dissertation for my higher English on Gormenghast, but in the end, I went in a different direction.
Yes, speaking as a teacher, that would have been an ambitious choice.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I went for something that you won't really approve of. I know Andy Least particularly isn't a huge fan of Thomas Hardy. Wuthering Heights, Far from the Madding Crowd, a bit of a comparison.
I'm always scarred by the fact that one of my best ever, I did English Lit at university, and my best ever mark was I wrote it horribly hungover, just from like Spark Notes or something about Tess the D'Urberville and Duty Obscure, and I got my best mark of the year on it. And I was like, oh, I haven't even read them. Just not fair.
So Seagoat had asked for Stark, and you just mentioned interactive fiction. So interactive fiction isn't something you see every day. Why interactive fiction? What interactive fiction? How interactive fiction?
I don't know. I think I started writing it because I can't draw. I'm a terrible artist. Like I can't really do the things I like to do. So it has to be word based a lot of the time. I started looking at Ink, which is a scripting language that Inkle make. They made 80 Days Around the World and a few other games, amazing games with it. But it's quite easy to learn, and so I don't have a huge amount of coding or programming background. And it looked about the type of thing that I could get my head around, and I just really enjoyed using it and writing it. And I entered they run a thing called Ink Jam every year, which is like a little game jam over a weekend where you kind of write a piece of interactive fiction. And that was, I did it then, and then I sort of just do it. I kind of do them more for fun, and they're all up. I've got a few that you can play for free. A couple of them are set in the world of Tenlo, which is my kind of space western. I put them all up for free on my itch.io page. So they're just good fun and kind of a completely different style of writing. And then because I can do those, I then started moving into using stuff like Artisy, which is another narrative scripting kind of program. Basically, I could do it without needing to do any art or know any programming. So that's why
sounds like a win. I hope Andy Law's taking notes.
Yes.
And we'll go a specific question for yourself, Greg, from Seagoat, who is a regular questioner as well as Kilishandra on the stream. So has your knowledge of fencing, weapons and techniques helped or hindered in your creation of combat rules?
Yeah, that's quite often the question I get asked, having written a fantasy RPG called Runesword, for those who don't know. It helped to some extent, but I have not tried to accurately simulate the minutiae of sword combat with game rules. To be honest, I think that's kind of boring. Like sword fighting is really cool, and I love researching it and doing it for real. But trying to recreate it with dice and words is just really weird for me. So what I tried to do was take certain kind of big picture aspects of sword fighting and simulate them in a very general way. So, for example, being skillful and trained counts for more than being big and strong. That weapons are dangerous, and if you get hit 2 or 3 times by a weapon, then you're probably finished. You can't stand there getting repeatedly stabbed by people. And having heavy armor on is a really big advantage. So these are things that I've kind of learned through the practice of historical fencing and just researching medieval history a little bit as well. So I've tried to bring all those into the game, but the rules are super simple.
Well, I study EIDO, and one of the things I didn't realise when I got my EIDO was how much time I would spend just like with subtle, just checking it was fine, and like I've got like a little bit of really thin wood that I've had to put in my saya because it's slightly wearing it down, and then that makes the EIDO not stick right in the saya, and just all of those little tweaks that you have to constantly do for the upkeep of your weapons, which I hadn't appreciated in role-playing games, when I was playing a character who, like, you know, every day would be potentially using a weapon, I hadn't realised the amount of time, and it has impacted now the way I think about my characters and the way I think about the upkeep of their weapons and how I might describe that. So it's been quite helpful for, not necessarily for rules, although Andy Law has asked us a few things about various things, but yeah, more for helping, like, kind of immerse yourself in a setting.
Yeah, the reality of utilizing weapons, even though it's in a hobby context in the modern world. And if you've ever had experience of wearing traditional clothes from the era or armor or something like that, that's an eye-opener as well. So in the past, I did a little bit of battle reenactment stuff, and just trying to do things while wearing a helmet is very interesting. If you can't see your feet, it's quite hard to do fancy things other than trip over your own feet quite a lot in my experience. So yeah, things like that are really an eye-opener when you compare them to the kind of almost super heroic idea people have of fantasy, I think.
Yeah.
You tempted to make people just encumbered all the time. It's like, puts mom up, you're encumbered.
It is, yeah. It was quite tempting to do that. I've eased off on that a little bit because you have to make a compromise between playability and realism, I guess. So yeah, I've got a simple encumbrance system in the game, and if you try to carry too much stuff, yeah, sure, you can't do it. But it's not super realistic that way.
And do you have any like particular bugbears when it comes to how combat is represented in other RPGs, not your own? Because like, one of the things, being I've done a very, very small amount of HEMA stuff.
Yeah.
And the thing that surprised me when I was using like German longsword is my understanding of what a two-handed sword was from fantasy role-playing games.
Yeah.
Something big and heavy that you swing around in massive arcs, and that wasn't at all. Like, it was so much more controlled.
Yes.
And like people stepping inside your grip wasn't an issue because you reverse your grip and you could still fight.
Yeah.
And that surprised me because I was like, oh, it shouldn't have, because of course it was just a silly tabletop game. That's not real.
Yeah.
But you know, but it felt very jarring when I realized what it actually was like. So,
yeah, my top bugbears are from Dungeons and Dragons and games derived from that engine. The idea that being really strong makes you more skilled in combat. It makes you able to lift stuff, sure, and maybe it gives you more stamina, but it doesn't make you a more skilled fighter. Skill makes you a more skilled fighter in training. That's probably my number one bugbear, I would say. But absolutely, the way weapons are represented is often not particularly realistic. Like, swords are in some ways not as heavy as people expect, and armor is maybe not as heavy as people expect. So stuff like that.
Yeah, my sword is definitely not as heavy as I expected. I mean, it gets heavy. Like, don't get me wrong, when you do like 100 times in a row, like, it gets pretty heavy. But actually, what gets more tiring is because a lot of the idols in kneeling forms is getting up and down from kneeling is harder than actually wielding the sword half the time. But yeah, what we spend so much time talking about, which I didn't realize, was distance. It's all about distance and about reach and about where you are and about where they are. Whereas I had always had the idea that the stronger and the bigger you were, actually, it's really the taller you are, the more easy it is to wield a blade that's much longer and you have a lot more reach. And that was really surprising for me.
Yeah, absolutely. In European fencing, timing and measure being the distance between two combatants, it's always the first principles you get taught.
Let's have a look at one. Isigo says, with my 18 strength, I can live my +5 Holy Avenger. I can't swing it at my enemies because I have no sword training.
Yes, that's a very good solution.
And Sigo also says, although I think he's misnamed your game. So Greg's game, Runesword, not Runeblade, is rules light. So he will definitely be picking up, as rules light games are in my wheelhouse right now.
Good stuff. Go for it.
It's because of the D&D 5e being quite like rules light that I ended up playing it. So I didn't grow up with games that didn't grow up with D&D or anything like that at all. And then, you know, with friends who were like, oh, we should give it a go. And I was like, oh, but I can't do maths in my head. Like, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm going to be able to remember everything. And then they're like, oh, just make a character and have a go at that. And of course, it's the gateway.
Are you playing just now?
No, not at the moment. We were playing the Curse of Strahd for a while.
Oh, classic.
Back to old school. That
What was your very first character?
Tiefling rogue. Basically, if I could
Classic.
just steal stuff and not being in the way of danger,
Yeah.
my ideal, and then just cause chaos.
Yeah. But that's what you would do in that situation, right? I mean, who
I'm
wants to be in
not
the
saying
front
that
line?
I am that person, but it certainly appealed to me.
Looking at a little rogue who's in our gaming group right now, that's always playing pranks on people.
But I was also like, as long as it has no magic stuff to remember, because I'm not going to be able to remember it. So I was like, no magic beyond the odd cat trick or two.
Yeah, we have talked about that, haven't we? Because we were playing Wifrit 4th edition with Andy Lawhammer tweaks at the moment. And we did discuss to begin with, because we had some players who were newer, like some of the characters are way more complicated to play than others because of that.
Yeah.
So, like, shall we talk a bit about rules light? Like, what drew you to writing a rules light?
So the game grew out of a homebrewed version of, and this is old school, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition, which for those who know it is not rules light. It's got a lot of maths, so you would hate it. And there's a lot of stuff to remember and a lot of finicky little rules. And I found myself constantly modifying it to chuck out stuff that was unnecessarily complicated, and then other things were not simulating the kind of medieval world I wanted to play in. And it went on like this until it got to the stage where I thought, I should just write my own game. I've changed this one so much that it's basically not the original game anymore. So yeah, that's where it came from, really. And then I went back to first principles and thought about what's the minimum number of numbers I can get away with in this, and built it from there.
We've talked about that a lot with Andy Law, about the minimizing dice rolls, minimizing numbers, but still making it a satisfying experience where you feel like there's some element of chance and it's not just a narrative game.
Yeah, because rolling the dice is fun and it creates the tension and therefore a lot of the drama of it as well.
Yes,
right? When you have a really good roll or a really bad roll, then that's your cliffhanger moments, I think.
And it's all about working at what do you want to spend time at the table doing?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to spend time at the table like cross-referencing 18 different charts to work out what you can do.
I think that's what I always assumed it would be.
Yeah.
And so the fact that I didn't have to sort of keep all of that in mind and then be constantly referring back was what persuaded me to be like, oh no, this is great.
Yeah.
One thing I'm looking forward to, we haven't got it ready yet, but in Warhammer, Andy is going to make cards for our spells and like prayers and miracles.
That is a really good idea, because my gateway into role-playing was the classic board game Hero Quest.
Yes, I'll use my broadsword.
Yeah, so all the equipment and all the spells are on these little cards, and you don't need to look up a rule book or anything. It's great.
Our DM made up drunk rules for us because we were doing one day. We got horribly drunk at the end of doing this thing. He was like, all right, next session. And we obviously all got into a massive fight, but we had special drunk rules. And we all ended up prone in our own vomit and stuff in the game.
Just to clarify.
Just to clarify. So, Stark, I'm going to come back to you. Kilishandra has asked, what is your creative process? And would it benefit from gamification, for example, like language apps used to aid with motivation? But let's start with what your creative process is first.
Trying to ignore everything while I'm writing, basically. So I get up and I do my writing best in the morning, and I just I try not to look at anything. I just sort of go and then try to get a few hours in, because as soon as I start engaging with real world stuff, you get decision fatigue pretty quickly, and so I just try to get everything out while I'm fairly fresh and untainted by reality. And I'm quite a sort of instinctive writer. I don't do a huge amount of plotting. I have this plot system. I always say I don't do plotting, but I have the system where I basically, with each chapter, I'll write like a couple of lines and I'll give it a star system. So red is action, yellow is character, green is description, and I'll mark each potential chapter with that. And I can really quickly get an overview of, like, okay, I've got 2 action chapters next to each other, or I've got too much description here. And so it can quickly give me like an overview, and that is apparently plotting. So apparently I do plan, but.
Can I ask how much of your storylines exist in your head before they get into the written form?
All of it.
Right.
And this is what I can't work on more than one project at one time. I wish I could, but I just get so engrossed in it. And I do keep a fair amount of notes, but I kind of have a theory that at a certain point I'll write a lot of notes, I'll put them aside, and it's what sticks is what's important. So
that's a good way of thinking about
won't be referring back to. But the gamification thing is interesting. I got horribly stuck with 10 Low because I wrote the first third of it as a NaNoWriMo project.
Oh yeah,
Just
okay.
Like, blurred it out. And then, but of course I had to finish it as a novel then, and I got so stuck that I've spent about 3 weeks lying face down on the floor, like, oh, I can't do it. I'm so stuck. And but then I eventually got so desperate, I just took a dictionary off the shelf and I was flipping through the pages, just stabbing at words. I was doing augury, like to try and like help me out of my predicament. And then I like jabbed at the word buzzard and was like, because in 10 Low it's kind of Western thing, so people ride like mules and mares and stuff. And I was like, who would ride a buzzard? I was like, a sheriff, but what the sheriff of? And then, what kind of town would that be? And
rides a buzzard? The coolest person ever.
Oh no, he's a real shit.
Oh no,
he's a real bastard. But I mean, that's fine. But it worked out for the character, and it just, I think it was that kind of random, almost dice rolling element unlocked the kind of, I've been in my own way creatively, and then just let me think about the ideas. So I mean, that kind of was gamifying the process, and it worked.
Wow.
Or the fates intervened, whichever way you go.
Yeah. Well, when I'm stuck for creative things, I actually need to get out to the countryside. I'd say that's the biggest stimulation for me. Like going for a walk in the hills or in the forest or something, and then I'm just completely separated from the pace of the city and everyday life, and that gives ideas kind of spark for me.
Yeah, it's always good advice. Go for a walk.
Yeah.
Or just stand in the shower for like an hour. Something about the white noise of it, I think, is quite helpful.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Like if you're in a forest or next to a river or something as well, it has the same effect.
Yeah, I do like the white noise of a river or a little burn.
Yeah.
I listen to, everyone's like, oh, what music do you listen to when you're writing? I can't really listen to anything with lyrics, but I also just listen to ambiences.
Yeah, I do the same.
I've listened to about 18 hours of Wind Through Tree in Desert.
Yeah.
I love that YouTube. It's my favorite.
In Norway, they have like slow TV.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I watched like the full train trip from Bergen to Oslo. It's amazing. Yeah. And the only it has subtitles, and the subtitles are just like metallic clang, because when they come to a station it goes dong. That's what they chose to subtitle.
Wow.
Yeah. And I watched it because I thought, oh, I'm learning Norwegian. I bet there'll be like lots of incidental, maybe voiceover. No, there's nothing. There's just the train announcements, metallic clang. A beautiful train journey.
Do you have to say metallic clang in Norwegian?
No, because it doesn't. They just clanged. Like they didn't even subtitle it in Norwegian. They just subtitled it in English. So unhelpful.
I love that go, and then that's the one phrase.
Yeah.
Got down.
Metallic clang. Let's have a look. Is there any, just shout out if you do have any questions in the audience. Andy Law will come round with a roving mic.
I have a roving mic and a deep voice that sounds much louder than everyone else's because I did a sound test beforehand. Oh, yes.
Seagoat has just said in the comments, walks in the countryside are good for inspiration, especially meeting random goats on your travels.
Only if you're near the sea, presumably.
Yeah. Okay, the roving mic is not quite as roving as we thought, so
move to the mic. Hello. My question was, we talked about HEMA and how that has affected some of your choices. I wondered if you have any other, both of you, any other passions that you kind of wanted other people to get into by putting them into your games, or the other way around, things that you looked up because you thought they were cool and then suddenly you were like really into them.
I mean, for me, it's history. History's always been a passion of mine from when I was a kid. So I'm constantly taking inspirations from particularly European history, I suppose, because that's what I mostly read about, but other things as well. So recently I read a really cool book about the Mongol Empire, and really specifically the western part of it. And I learned so many new things about it, but there are so many points in that which can be easily imported into a role-playing game, like the way these people's traveled around over great distances with very simple technology, for example, how they crossed rivers and stuff. I couldn't tell you the technical details right now, but it was just very inspirational to read about these amazing travelers and warriors crossing the whole of Asia, crossing massive rivers, crossing huge mountain ranges, and ending up in Europe. So, yeah, history. You can always be inspired by history, I think.
Ghost of Tsushima has a little sub game. Well, it's not a mini game. It's just a collecting. So you're collecting items, but it's items from the invading horde.
Right, yeah.
And it was really interesting because each of them then describes like what it was used for and how the horde used them, and it was really, really interesting. So it did pique my interest, and so I might need to pick up that book.
Yeah, I think it's just called The Horde, and if I remember correctly, the author is Marie Favreau or something like that. I need to double check it, but really cool book.
Mine is really way more prosaic than that. It's food.
Yep.
I don't know. I love writing about food, and in my non-slinger sort of jam it in places, and then in Tenlo, there's not much food around, and so it's quite fun thinking about what are they going to be eating and stuff on this desert planet. But in Shadows of Doubt, there's some really rich world lore, but because it's procedurally generated, all of the storytelling and world building, it has to come through in-world items and things like that.
Okay,
So.
yeah.
You know, there's this alternate 1980s where it's this catastrophic climate change has already happened. So everyone eats like simp meat. But it's this sort of like 1950s, 1980s hybrid. And so I came up with all these like sandwiches that are named after the corporations. And it's all buried there in the world lore. So yeah, that's probably one thing that keeps coming back. And I just love doing bits of storytelling with kind of everyday objects like that.
Yeah, and that's really interesting actually, because food and water are obviously important resources, vital resources. So you can tell a lot of stories with that, I think.
Yeah.
It's obviously at the heart of things like Mad Max, for example. Yeah.
But yeah, I love that idea, because I think that for me is sometimes where I feel I can't immerse myself in something when either it's a totally different world, but everything is the same, like the food and the schools, all of that's the same as our world, or it's just not detailed enough.
Yeah.
So, I'm loving your sandwiches.
Yeah.
I think Abs has got a question.
Just got some breaking news, a live translation update. Norwegian for metallic clang is metallisk clang with a K.
Oh well.
Now you're sorted.
Now I'm sorted. But metallisk clang. Excellent. Right. Oh, so I've made my banners disappear, so I've lost all the questions. Okay, Kilishandra has another question, which is, what is your favorite game of any sort, and do you think it would benefit from better fictional support?
That is hard. I like lots of games, so it's hard to choose.
Maybe Andy will have one straight up. I'll just put him on the spot.
Oh, thanks. My favorite game. I mean, I can't pick a favorite game. Like, that's not fair. That's not a fair question. I'll pick my most recent acquisition, right? So I recently got a copy of A Study in Emerald, which is the game that's like it's based on a Neil Gaiman short story, which itself is a mashup of the Cthulhu mythos and the sort of Sherlock Holmes kind of stories. And that's, I guess that's the opposite of what they're saying in terms of fictional support. That's literally a piece of fiction that was then turned into a game. And that tends to be the way my brain works, and that's maybe because of what we do in terms of like writing for role-playing games, that I tend to take fiction, and there's one narrative, and that's a great story, lovely, but what I want to do is make all the branching other things, make the world for other people to play and tell their stories. So yeah, the sort of the opposite of that for me.
Yeah, I mean, my brain tends to think in a similar way, actually. So I'm not actually a huge fan of, let's say, franchise RPGs. So I'd feel a bit weird playing a Star Wars role-playing game, for example. But things which are inspired by literary subgenres help me get immersed in the game rather than the other way around. So I love cyberpunk stuff, for example, and I'm always on the lookout for cool dystopian sci-fi games to play. So yeah, I tend to think of it that way rather than latching onto a game and then wishing there was a story about it. It's more how I can bring stories into the games, I think.
Yeah. mean, one of my favorite games is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which is sort of classic. But I mean, you can't really still support that.
It's kind of sorted already.
I wonder what you could do with that. What possible novels could you write to support that game?
No, it's definitely not more than one.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's I think, I don't know, my favorite recent game, there's one, a narrative kind of pixel art game called Norco, which is really cool, and it's kind of this dystopian near future thing set in a kind of Louisiana-esque setting, and I would just love to read a book set there. So yeah, it's indie narrative. It's a great game, but yeah, that I'd be well up for reading something in that setting.
Seagoat has a follow-up question. Cribbage. What fictional support would you offer this game? Thanks, Seagoat. I think if you're playing a franchise-based game, then it really helps if your GM really leans in to the tropes of that franchise. And I say that referencing a campaign that Andy did for us in Star Wars, where each episode that we played had its own crawl, and it was numbered. We started at episode 9 or something.
I'd like to object to these in the past tense because we never finished it, so I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Sorry about that one.
We're in an abandoned Sith temple right now, and it's looking pretty scary. So yeah.
And actually, there's a specific example of that. I don't know if you remember, but we were in a spaceship. And the air started kind of venting out or whatever, and I did that annoying player thing of going, actually in physics. and he was like, yeah, but we're not in physics, we're in Star Wars. And I'm like, fair point, I withdraw my reservation. It's not real sci-fi.
Yeah. I think we vented ourselves out in a garbage disposal unit. Classic Star Wars. Classic Star Wars. So just in general, how Kilishandra's asked, how has gaming influenced your creative process?
I mean, yeah, my creativity expresses itself through the gaming stuff, basically. So yeah, it's at the heart of that. I've never seriously tried to write prose fiction, and don't think I'd be very good at it. So yeah, my focus is really on the gaming stuff. But obviously, it'd be different for you.
Yeah, it's a different kind of. It's difficult because it's a kind of a different sort of creative process. And the thing I'm really loving about it is just actually working with a group of people, being part of a team. In Novalis, I'm on a writer's room for it, so there's 4 of us, and it's great. It's because it's different to when you're on your own with a book, it's you and that book for 6 months, a year, no feedback from anyone. So it's this kind of long form thing, whereas it's a much more living, kind of breathing creative process when you're in a team with people. And the other thing that's great is working in discrete chunks. So I have tasks to do, and today I'm working on dialogue or whatever. I think probably one of the things that's good for teaching is just how to be brief and how to be sort of pithy with what you're wanting to do. So, and maybe I don't know if that's fed into my fiction or not. Maybe it's kind of taught me to be make a point and just make it well in rich language rather than sort of trying to go all around houses too much. But it's hard to say, and I don't feel that they're that different in terms of my writing style, but just a different approach, I suppose.
And what did you do first? So what was your background as you came into writing?
It was novels first.
Novels first.
Yeah, and then I sort of fell into games. Just because the studio I knew wanted someone to write a pitch for an multiplayer interactive fiction. And me not knowing better, was like, okay, yeah, I'll write you the pitch for that. And then they won the pitch, and they were like, okay, do you want to make it?
So I have to ask, how can you have multiplayer interactive fiction? I actually don't understand how that would work.
I learned the meaning of the word exponential. With flowcharts. Lots and lots of flowcharts. Okay. It was not a very long game, which is, I think, the only way it's possible, basically. Yeah. A short game with lots of pinch points was the only way it can happen. But luckily, it was for the BBC's R&D department, so we didn't need to sell it. Okay. So I think it worked, but it was definitely, that was the first ever game project I worked on. Right. So it was like the biggest crash course for learning narrative systems and techniques ever. But yeah, it was. I'm glad I did it. I was very naive.
Well, yeah, on that, do you have any advice for people who are maybe younger or getting into the industry?
I think just make your own stuff. And a lot of people don't necessarily want. It's difficult. I think just make your own stuff all the time. Put it up on itch.io, enter like little game jams and stuff. And if your stuff is out there, people can find it and play it and read it. That's great. And I think people, maybe game employers, are more interested in that than qualifications sometimes. Like showing that you've got a passion for it and that you do it all the time yourself and you're experimenting with it. So yeah, I think that's what I would do, and that's kind of what I do now. I've been offered work by people who found my stuff on itch and played it, and then found it that way. So yeah, if you write some stuff and put it out there.
Yes, so just constantly create. create.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be finished, and it just ideas.
Yeah, and a lot of people that we've had on the stream have had a similar, not the same answer, but a very similar answer, which is just practice, create. You know, you won't be paid for something until you've done it. Well, you may be paid, you may be really lucky and you might just write your first novel and someone will go, yeah, I'll have that first novel, please. But realistically, before you've done that first novel, you've probably written quite a lot of things.
Oh yeah, and there's value for doing it for yourself as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's like my itch project, I don't put them up for any money. I do them because I really enjoy it. And so there's definite value in doing something just because you think it's fun and just because you're having a good time doing it. So not everything has to sort of have a means and ending.
And how has your career developed? If you could go back, are there things you would do differently or?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, it's at an early stage just now. So Runesword's my first product, and there are a couple of supplementary books in the pipeline, so to speak, but it's all at an early stage. But I absolutely agree with what Stark said. You have to do these things because you love them and because you want to do them, I think. You're not going to get that creative spark if you're just thinking, I don't know, I want to make money doing this. How can I do it? I think that's the wrong way around. Yeah. And I don't really have any great expectations of getting rich off of the back of publishing an indie role-playing game. Like I put it out there because it was fun for me to do it, and because I enjoy playing the game I wrote, and I hope that other people enjoy it as well. And that's it. I just want to contribute that to the community.
Yeah. So we do have a question on that we had talked about before. So what is it like being an indie creator? Like, what do you think they add to the respective industries? How is it different to working for the man?
I mean, I've never written anything for the man, so to speak, so can't answer for that. But I think it is important to have independent creators out there who are just contributing new ideas because they have them, because they love them. I think in the modern world of mass marketing, and really mass marketing now with social media and lots of digital stuff going on, it's easy for things to get really swamped by big commercial corporate enterprises, I think, and it's important that there's still sparks of individuality and creativity and new ideas coming in from independent creators. So that's the value I would see in it.
Because there's two sides to that, isn't there? Because there's, on the one hand, you're unencumbered, so you're free. You're not as constrained by that corporate mechanism, and that gives you the freedom to maybe do things that are a bit dangerous or a bit unconventional. But then also the motivation, like you say, your motivation is to make something that you like. Whereas, you know, not to name any large RPG, let's prevent them. But ultimately, what's their motivation to make more money?
Yeah, exactly. Of course.
And that's fine, but that is going to lead to a different type of product. So,
yeah, exactly.
It's incredibly important in games and in books as well. It's like some of the most interesting fiction is coming out of small presses,
right?
And indie presses, because they can afford to take these risks. They're not having to report back on, you know, to a sales team. Here's the projected thing. So, you know, there's some really, really good indie presses out there who are just publishing the stuff that's going to push the genre forward. And that's, you see it in indie games as well. Like some of the most interesting stuff that's coming out is by indies.
Yeah, I think so.
And yeah, I think it's incredibly important. And yeah, just glad that the tools are out there now that people can start doing it themselves if they want to.
Absolutely, that's really important. Like the modern world gives us all these tools, especially digital tools, to make these sorts of creative endeavors accessible to people. You just need that spark and a bit of patience and some motivation, and you can do it. You might not get rich, but you can do it.
How do you feel about ChatGPT?
I knew this was
Mid-journey?
coming.
I know, well, I had
Oh,
to.
yeah.
I just felt it. As soon as you said
Yeah.
modern tools, I was like, we have to talk about that. Will it replace you as an interactive fiction writer?
It'll replace me with really derivative, boring
Yeah, yeah.
dialogue. So I mean, it maybe if people always, big studios potentially always going to want to use it to save having to pay writers, probably.
Mhm.
But it depends. Do people want just like loads of NPCs waffling at you with some fairly derivative kind of
Yeah, generic.
slightly
Yeah.
generic prose, or do you want it to sort of have a more crafted tone to it? And I'm sure games will use it, just like people are using Midjourney. Can't stop people from doing it. I don't know, but so maybe it will replace some opportunities, but potentially they're things I wouldn't want to work on anyway.
Mhm.
If that's the direction the developers were going to go with
Yeah.
it. So
And for me, I feel like there's obviously a joy in the creative process in whatever medium you work in. And I feel like people can sense that on the other end if they're really into whatever it is, if it's music, literature, games, painting, drawing, whatever. People can sense that, I believe, can sense that humanity on the other end of it. And I don't think ChatGPT can deliver that.
Yeah.
It's very good at delivering prosaic text, but like that's it.
Yeah, and really generic. Like I asked her to write some letters to assess its gender bias because that's what I do for fun. And they were just, beside the fact that they were really biased, they were just like really so generic that they were pointless. I would have had to tell it everything that I wanted it to say. At which point I'm like, well, why wouldn't you just write that letter yourself? Because then, especially because it was a letter that I would want to write to someone.
So now there's the new parasite industry that spawned, which is people who will give you prompts so that you can use ChatGPT and AI.
Well, I might interject with a funny but alarming story at this point. So my day job is actually as a language teacher. And English is a foreign language teacher. Okay?
Mhm.
And I heard from another teacher that she had assigned homework to a class to write an essay about something, and she got them back, and then she was like, some of these students have potentially cheated on us by using ChatGPT. So she ran the essays through ChatGPT and asked the program, did you write these essays? And it gave her the answer that it had in certain cases. And she interrogated it about its basis for saying that. And it was a convincing argument that it recognized its own work.
Whoa.
I was
That's crazy.
I know that there's a separate thing that people have made that is essentially reverse engineers, but I found it wildly inaccurate. I had a piece that again from one of my students, I wasn't sure. So and you have two ways: you can either upload a document or you can paste the text in, and I got a different result depending which way I put it in. And I'm like, that is therefore not reliable. I can't use that as a tool.
It's potentially a reflection on the metrics by which essays and the education system is based as well, because it's like, I know when I was doing A levels, I looked up the AO objectives that I would want to hit, and then I wrote the essay in that form. So it's not a hard thing to do in that sense to game the system. So
but that would lead you to the conclusion that why use ChatGPT? Just do the work.
Just do the work. It's easy enough.
So it's the same for creative things. I think just do the work.
And why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
great
It's
thing.
fun.
Why would you want to skip that bit?
Totally.
Yeah. What does Seagoat say? Indie games are good. +1 for IGDN, Indie Game Developer Network, in supporting indie developers out there. Thanks, Seagoat, for your wisdom. Oh, I thought you had a question, Andy. No. I know that Greg, you wanted to have a chat about the kind of the development of the RPG scene over the years. Was there anything particular?
Yeah,
you
well,
wanted to bring out?
I'm just kind of curious about other people's view on it, because I started role playing when I was around 12 years old, so that's early 1990s, and played quite solidly for 10, 12 years, and then took a break from it and came back, and it felt a little bit different after the break I'd had. Like a lot of the games I had played back in the day had kind of faded away. new ones had come along, of course, but it just felt like the dynamic of the scene was a little bit different. And to my eyes, it seemed like tabletop role-playing games have become increasingly influenced by computer games in a way. Like I felt there was a lot of things about how characters develop and experience points are awarded and stuff that had to come in from things like Diablo and World of Warcraft and stuff like that. So that was just kind of my feeling about it, and I wondered if other people had seen that or had seen something different about the development of the scene.
I mean, there was definitely like 4th edition D&D,
Right,
definitely was very, very evidently influenced by that. And I think they probably are, but I think it's a two-way street. I think as well, like computer RPGs are very much being influenced by the sort of storytelling.
Yeah,
at least the good ones are anyway, and are becoming more about kind of interesting narratives and things. I mean, the biggest difference I've seen within the last couple of years, and it's a result of all of the mass media proliferation around that. Should be that Big Bang Theory, Stranger Things, as well as Critical Role and stuff like that. But that definitely, it feels like it's a much wider demographic of people.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And again, like I teach currently in an all-girls high school, and I've been running like an RPG kind of group there for the first time, and it was like they approached me because they noticed me wearing a nerdy t-shirt on my own clothing. Like, do you play? Oh, we like D&D. I was like, okay, I'll run that for you. I'll teach you how that works. And then while setting that one up, then another much smaller group of kids, like about 11, 12 year, just randomly had started playing it themselves at lunchtime.
Oh, that's really cool.
And it was really nice to sort of see it just spontaneously popping up and all just openly talking about it in a way that it wasn't the secret arcane thing that it was when I was kind of growing up. It was much more people it was a hobby that people had and they know what it is. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a great development. When I was getting into it, it was 100% geeky boys like me.
Well, it would be like intimidating, right? If, say you had to go into a shop and buy it and stuff, and you're a bit like, oh, I don't want to go on my own, and like there's everyone here like me, and I'm not sure what to do. So yeah, the fact that like people can like look stuff up on the internet, they can watch other people play it, they can so probably the rise of like let's play unpopular groups playing it live has helped as well. Kind of people get into it that way and then think, oh, actually that looks really fun. So maybe I want to start my own group.
And I think like Critical Role has been such a big part of that, partially because they're voice actors, and so many kids that are our younger daughter's age at the moment, well, the older one too, but more the younger one, they're so obsessed with various like anime, cartoons, etc., and they know those people as voice actors, and so they've kind of been like, oh, something that maybe they wouldn't have been interested in, they're now more interested in because it kind of is in a Venn diagram with another like nerdy thing that they like, which actually, like when my girls started to get into anime, they were very much in the minority at their school, and by the end now of their school life, they're not anymore. Like so many more kids are like, oh yeah, that's really cool, and Laurie plays like the theme tunes from various animes, and people think it's cool now. Whereas before they'd just be like, what are you even playing on the piano?
Excellent.
Yeah. I was there was a comment in the chat, but I couldn't find it. It was about D&D and like 2nd edition, I think. And all the maths and I'm with you, like it was really intimidating to begin with, like working out systems and feeling a little bit silly and also feeling slow, like everyone else knows what is happening and knows what they need to do, and you're slowing everyone else down because you don't know. It's horrible.
I just can't do maths in my head. Like I'm really bad at it. So even playing D&D, I'd roll, because I ended up having like 66 with one of my things. I'd roll it and I'd just stare at it, and then my head would go blank, and then I'd stare at it some more, and then the person I played with would lean over and go,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, so I feel like back in the day, that thing about the complex number crunching stuff, it was quite elitist in a way. It's like if you knew how to do all that, if you knew the arcane code of the THACO, for those who know what that is, then you were one of us, and if you didn't know that,
I never cracked that code.
And I think a lot of that fed into the dynamics of the table as well, because it was very much the era of the GM versus the players. Right. You weren't all telling a story together. They were trying to kill you, and you were trying to stop them killing you and kind of win the dungeon. It was much more competitive, like within the party, rather than people kind of working together. And it's interesting that I had never really put it together, but I think it is ABV 2nd edition. I have a visceral visceral dislike of tables in RPGs, like to the point where whenever Andy would ask me to write a table, I'd be like, I really don't want to. Can you do the table? Like, I'll write all the words around. I'll even give you the words to put in the table, but I don't want to put it in the table because I hate them. I don't know why, and I think it's just some kind of PTSD from back then.
Yeah, you could also see it in wargaming as well. So I knew loads and loads of girls and young women, like when I was younger, and we kind of weren't invited. Like your boyfriends would be playing, and you weren't invited to the table. And so a lot of us ended up getting into it through painting because that was something that they couldn't like gatekeep from you, because you could go into the shop and you could buy the elves that you wanted and you could paint them. And I know honestly so many women and girls got into wargaming through painting miniatures and actually like never played the game, or it took much longer to get into playing the games. And it wasn't because we didn't want to, it was because there was kind of that barrier. I hesitate to say that it wasn't this boyfriend. He firmly, by the time Andy and I met, and when I met the Andys, they were both working in Games Workshop, and they did invite me in and teach me how to play the game.
I was a good guy.
Yeah, you were a good guy. But that experience wasn't universal for a lot of girls and young women who were trying to get into something that they thought was really interesting and looked really cool, but was really like, how do I come around the edge of this? Well, we're almost at the end of our stream, so I guess I just want to say, go over to our guest, to start to Greig, and say, is there anything you want to tell us? What's coming up in the future? Anything you'd like the audience to know? And if not, how are you enjoying the weekend? Having a good time here.
Yeah, that's a much easier question.
Yeah.
No, I've got so I'm writing a third book in the sort of someone called it the Factus series, and I was like, okay. I mean, let's call it that. I haven't. That's okay. So that's a follow-up to Hell's 8, and that should be coming out in 2024. I just have to finish it first. And then obviously I'm working on Shadows of Doubt, which is an early access at the moment, but we're going to keep working on it. And if you like immersive detective sims, then check that one out. Definitely.
For me, I'm taking a little break from Runesword related stuff just now because I'm in the middle of trying to finish off a book about historical fencing. So it's going to be a training manual for the style that I teach, based on the lessons that I've developed through running a club.
And do you run that club in Edinburgh?
I do, yeah.
Tell us about that.
yeah. So it's called Edinburgh Renaissance Fencing Academy, or ERFA for short. It's a small club. I'm the only instructor there, but we're very much focused on trying to recreate and revive this 16th century Italian style of swordsmanship that we focus on. So I tried to run it as a martial arts club, not a sports club. So the emphasis is on training, self-development, connecting with the history of it all, reviving these old skills, and shying away from more like the modern sports competition aspect of combat sports, I guess. So the book's going to be all about that, basically, and how to train in it, lesson plans, bits of historical background about the weapons, all that kind of stuff.
So cool. When is that coming out?
Well, it's in a first draft state at the moment, and it's with a couple of proofreaders, so it's probably going to have to go through another couple of drafts, and I need to get diagrams and photos and stuff sorted. Fingers crossed next year. And there will also be some more Runesword supplements coming out as well. I'm going to start writing those next winter, so there'll be like campaign settings and maybe a Game Master's companion to aid writing your own adventures and stuff like that.
Well, Seagoat will be happy to hear that, because while we have been talking, Seagoat has picked it up from Drive Through RPG.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Yay! Thanks, Seagoat. Are there any final questions from the audience? Oh. No, I thought there was any. Or anything from you, Andy? No. Final questions? No. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. Thanks for joining us live for the second year in a row. It's been really great to meet you and hear about your work. And hopefully we can stay in touch and maybe have you on another Inside the Rookery just to talk about your own work or yours when the book comes out or when your next one comes out. Until the next time, thank you to everyone here at CYMERA. Thank you to Abs, as always, for helping us set this up. Thanks to Andy Law for
Very
his
much.
technical wizardry. Thanks to Andy Leask, my fellow panelist or host. And thank you to Greg and Stark. And until the next time, I will say good night and caw-caw, caw-caw.